Welcome back. This is Breakfast Daily on Citi TV. Thank you so much for spending your holiday with us. This is an amazing one by Sun Trophy. We cannot wait to learn more about this band. The entire studio, we've been dancing all morning long, and it's a blast. Now, we're going to talk a bit about Founders Day from a historical perspective, not necessarily the politics of it, but the history of it. Who are the people who contributed to our independence and the people we should be learning about? It's such a privilege to have Kwaku Darko Ankrah with us. He's a researcher at the Institute of African Studies, and he's going to walk us through the history of Founders Day. Good morning, Kwaku.
No, I'm not a researcher.
Oh, no.
I'm an affiliate.
Okay. Is that your way of being humble? Or
yes, affiliate.
Okay, affiliate.
Okay. It's only the professors and doctors who are called researchers.
But you guys are all researchers to us.
No,
okay, affiliates. That's the proper way.
There's distinction.
Okay, an affiliate of the Institute of African Studies.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Thank you so much for
Thank you too for making my day enjoyable. From the Sun Trophy
enjoy Sun Trophy,
Yes, quite interesting.
I think we should just have a show with just
the whole day.
They
are so good.
Yeah,
they are so good.
Yeah. Now let's talk about Founders Day. Where do we start from? What is it?
Yeah, for most Ghanaians, what we have known over the years is Founders Day, the one with apostrophe at the end of the R before S. Okay, now we have founders, there's no apostrophe. So which means the first one is celebrating a sole individual for his role. And then this second one, where the apostrophe is removed, is celebrating a group of individuals who contributed towards our independence. So that is what is happening.
Okay.
And we know President Atamils introduced the Founders Day, the one that celebrates a single individual. And the argument, as has been raised, is that when you look at Ghana's independence journey, starting from 1874, when this Ghana, then called Gold Coast, became a British colonial territory, there were a series of attempts, resistance, and fights towards regaining back our freedom as people. And that fight took series of events. And this historical event is divided into three parts. In history, we call the first part, or the first epoch, cultural or plaintive nationalism.
Say that again.
Cultural or plaintive nationalism.
Okay.
And the cultural plaintive nationalism is talking about where the group of people who are from various ethnic groups were identifying themselves as people who belong in one territory.
Okay.
Not necessarily about their individual ethnicity, but the realization of self-identity as a group. Okay? So this started with the Fanti Confederation, moving on to the Fanti Amembu Feku, which in English is translated Fanti National Constitution, which emerged in 1888, and finally culminated into Aborigines Right Protection Society in 1897.
Okay.
So those were the period, that period from 1874 up to 1897 is what is called plaintive or cultural nationalism. So here, there was an awareness that we are Africans. We must begin to bear our names. We must begin to wear African clothes. We must begin to think like Africans. The educational curriculum should not strictly be an European studies alone, but African studies, Ghana's Gold Coast studies, our indigenous ethnic studies, so that we form the mind and think like an African.
Now, who sparked this plaintive nationalism movement? Was it an individual or just the Fantis?
Yeah, because of the education started from the Fanti area. So they had produced a chunk of intellectuals around that time.
Okay.
So we have people like SRB Atahoma Solomon, Richard Bill Solomon. That was the man's name. But when he gained his consciousness, he changed his name to Atahoma.
Wow.
He was a Methodist priest. He said he can't bear any
the colonial name.
Yeah, so he changed his name. Then we have J.B. Anaman, who was called Kwame Anamua. The name Anamua is what was anglicized into Anaman. You see,
like
so,
Bosomfield.
Yeah, so he has to retrace their food. And these two people became the intellectual idea who sparked that plaintive nationalism. And they wrote series of articles in the newspapers they were edifying in that days. So Anaman was talking about the fact that even the Bible must be translated into Fanti language. The songs that they sing in the church must be translated. And even instead of using the European machines like the organs and so on, they must start to play dondo, atompan, and so on in the churches. And as a result, even Anaman had problem with the Methodist church and he was sacked. So he had to go and form his own church called the Negration Church. The last remaining church is at Anumabu today. I think the last time I visited the church, the members in the church cannot even count up to 10.
Wow.
And they are all old. So when those people fade, Negration Church will never exist again.
Well, hopefully some of us will go visit.
That was the J.B. Anaman and what he did. So there were a group of people, they started this thing. And they were the same people who morphed into the Aborigines' Rights Protection Society.
Link it to.
So the Aborigines Rights Protection Society is a movement that came as a result of the Land Bill of 1894, where the Crown or the Queen of England came out with a bill stating that any land in the Gold Coast that is not occupied by individual is seen as a free land and a wasteland, and as a result must belong to the Queen of England. Then the Gold Coasters argued that that is not true. In Africa, if you want to see who owns the land, all what you need to do is to enter that person's farm. And the following day or that very moment, you will hear the owner coming after you to ask you, do you know whose land you are actually utilizing? So that is what sparked the agitation. So they wrote a series of articles begging the colonial regime from 1894 to stop. They were not heeding to the request by the locals. So what they did that in 1897, these agitations reached its crescendo. And as a result, in April 17th, 1897, they met at Cape Coast and founded Aborigines Rights Protection Society. Okay? So the society's intention was to fight vigorously against the Crown Land Bill of 1894 to ensure that it is repealed. And here, some of the members there were J.E. Kesili Hayford, John Mensah Saba, Chief Abraham, E.J.P. Brown, J.P. Brown, then Jacob Wilson-Say. Jacob Wilson-Say was the rich man amongst them. So he personally used his own resources, bought a ship, and then ferried the delegation from Gold Coast to England to go and fight the case at the House of Lords in England. So they were led by T.F.E. Jones and George Hughes were delegated to go and do that with Jacob Wilson-Say. And they went for a Sierra Leonean lawyer, H.F. Hunt, who became their solicitor, and then they apparently fought the case in the British House of Lords, and they won their case.
Wow. And
returned home victoriously. And as a result of this job that was done by this Aborigines Rights Protection Society, the entire West African coast was saved from what happened in the Central East Africa and South Africa, where their land became the properties of the European colonial authorities.
What date was this, if you can?
1897.
1897. So all of this was happening even before, I don't even think, were the members of UGCC born around this time?
Not at all.
So all these events were happening.
2 years old when Aborigines Rights Protection Society was founded. In Nkrumah, 1900, so Nkrumah too will be, Nkrumah wasn't born then.
So how did they now inspire this new generation of lawyers and intellectuals who would now go and say, we want independence, we are no longer fighting for our land? but we want you out. We want to govern ourselves. Link the two for us if you can.
As a matter of fact, these people have always seen themselves as people whose land were not conquered. Neither was it annexed. They saw themselves that the land was taken by the British through treaties they signed. For the Fantis, they signed the Bond of 1844. And it was the Bond of 1844 that the British came with the Foreign Jurisdiction Act around 1874 to, in a way, according to what Kwaku Darko described as smuggle in the Bond of 1844 into the 1874 Foreign Jurisdiction Act and give British jurisdictional rights in Gold Coast. Are you getting the point?
Yes, so they didn't have to fight a war and conquer them. They just signed some sort of binding agreement.
Because the Fantis wanted treaties of protection from the British against the Ashantis. So that's why they went into that sort of alliance. So these people have that history in mind. So they know that at any time they can also use historical modus operandi to come out of that
and win
treaty.
It back. And that's exactly what they did.
So they beat them in their own game.
Wow. Now, where did the chiefs come in with the cocoa distribution and someone giving them bad pricing and then joining the lawyers and the UGCC? Connect those dots for us.
So, you know, when the cocoa business became very prominent as a result of Tata Kwashi's mode. As you know, cocoa was already in Gold Coast. It was first started by the Swedish in Cape Coast in around 1600s. It didn't work when they built the Cape Coast Castle. Then the Basel Mission also started one at Equapium Mampom, but they were not into commercial value until Tata Kwashi brought the Amanado cocoa species, which he got from Fernando Po. And then brought, which is today Equatorial Guinea. And then he started his mini farm at Mampo Equapium, and it apparently fed the weather, and then it was used for commercial exploitation. As a result, land became a very important commodity, as well as the presence of mineral concessions in the Gold Coast at that moment. So the British have to find a way of getting access to the land and use. And one of the methodology they used was the indirect rule. The indirect rule saw the chiefs as coast trustees in ruling the African people. So while the British were the rulers, they ruled through the chiefs.
Now, were these the original chiefs who were on the side of Prempeh when they were resisting, or were these new group of chiefs who were collaborating with the colonial administration?
Of chiefs. As for the chiefs, some have resisted way back before 1844.
Wow.
They had resisted. And as I said, by 1899, the only last remaining territory that had not become part of Gold Coast was Ashanti. So they had to fight war. And that is the Yasantua War of 1900. And after that war, in which the Asantis were defeated, then in 1902, they signed to become a British territory.
So when they signed, is that when these chiefs now decided we're going to collaborate? No,
you need not to sign to collaborate, because as long as you have been defeated, automatically somebody is ruling you. But within all this administration, Ashanti was left to rule on its own traditional structures. The Northern Territories was also allowed to also operate in its own structures. But the Gold Coast colony proper, which is from Axim to Aflau, minus the Vedome areas, then up to, the Northern Territories, minus part of Boku, part of Mamprusi, part of Gonja, part of Ketekrachi, which is called the Transvolta Togoland. They became part of the Gold Coast colony in 1956, where we had the 1956 plebiscite.
Wow.
So they have different history, but the Aunwa proper and the Tong people has always been part of Gold Coast from the 1890s long before Ashanti even became part in 1902.
Wow. Now let's talk about the different actors. What was going on in the early 40s? Where did these lawyers come from and these business people who now decided we want more? What we are getting is not enough. And how were they even able to convince these chiefs who were collaborating with the colonial administration to now be on their side? What was going on? And if it happened decades before that, so please walk us through it.
Yeah. When sometimes we refer to the chiefs as collaborators, I think we should be very careful.
Okay.
The indirect rule made it possible for the chiefs. They passed a law called 1888, what is called Native Jurisdiction Ordinance of 1888, NJO.
Okay.
When they came out with that one, they made chiefs part of their ruling. And the name itself speaks for itself, Native Jurisdiction Act. Because the British, when they were coming, they had monarchical form of governance from their hometown.
What is that?
Or their country.
Like a
which
monarchy.
is based on kinship.
Okay.
And the African traditional or the primordial traditional structure of the Africans is also based on kinship or chiefdoms.
Okay.
So when they came, they realized that, oh, there is something synonymous with what these people have here and what we have. So the intellectual force in Britain came out with a new idea of finding a way of governing the Gold Coast colony or the African territories. So a man called Lord Lugard wrote a book called Dual Mandate, where he used the northern Hausa Caliphate at Kano and how they operate through the kinship system, that it can be replicated in the other British territories. So it was started in the Kano, in the northern Nigeria, before it was brought to Gold Coast.
Okay.
So when they brought that, the chieftaincy system was there, so they could rule through the chiefs. Okay. So this also gave the chiefs powers. And the chiefs, as you know, before the emergence of the intellectuals, the chiefs were the natural rulers. So for them, they feel that if somebody ought to lead the people, they had the natural role since time immemorial to lead the people and not the emergent intellectual force. And this brought the fight between the intellectuals and the chiefs.
Okay, now yesterday we were talking about the role of women as well in this whole movement. Can you shed some light to it so that we can all read about these women?
Okay, so the women's role, if you look back from the 1860s to 70s, there have been women who were involved in some of the struggles. But what they did then was more in writing.
Okay.
So you can feel their role in the literary form. And that also made impact because they wrote series of articles in the colonial newspapers that forced the colonial regime to also answer to some form of agitations they raised in their newspapers column.
Okay.
So people like Kate Dawson, Mrs. Barnes, Mrs. Brew, and others, they all did some form of writings back in the day. Okay. But from the Abolitionist Right Protection Society, we didn't hear more of the women. The women played more of a role as organizers in meetings and what have you. Okay. So once prominent like Mrs. A.J.E. Bakna, Bakna was a Nigerian Yoruba man who came to Gold Coast. And his children are late Charles Kofi Bakna, the actor. His grandchildren are one of them, and so on. And his brother is Jude Bakna, who is with the African Development Bank until recently.
I wish we could continue the conversation, but we've run out of time so quickly. Where do we follow you on social media so we can worry you with more questions?
My name is Kwaku Darko Ankrah. So
Kwaku Darko Ankrah.
And I'm always also on Citi, so we can add more to it whenever Thank you
so much. And his Kwaku is with the KWE. Fanti. Thank you so much, Kwaku Darko Ankrah, for being with us and helping us understand Founders Day a bit more from the perspective of history. And of course, he's an affiliate of the Institute of African Studies. Don't go anywhere. Breakfast Daily will be right back.